We're Donna and Joe Burke, and we're from San Antonio, Texas. We're actually transplants to Texas. We met in Missouri, where Joe was raised and grew up, and I actually was transplanted from Oklahoma and actually went there on my job. I went to college in Missouri, and then I was hired by the telephone company and went to work in part of the towns in one of the towns that Joe worked in, and that's where we met and we're married. And
we met in January and got married in March.
Yeah,
she didn't have to get married.
We had a very short courtship, but we've been married 36 years, so it was actually a marriage that was meant to be.
3 weeks ago today, I went to my ophthalmologist and for pre-cataract surgery, and during the test, he found a mass on the back of my eye, and he sent me to a retina specialist who took more tests, and
we were pretty shocked about this. He went into thinking he was having a pre-op surgery visit with our ophthalmologist, and I was with him, and during that time they found that there was a tumor.
He said that I could go to San Antonio and get it done, or there's a world-renowned hospital clinic in Philadelphia named Wells Eye Clinic. And my wife asked him which one he would go to, and he said I think I would go to Wells. He said they're the best in the world, and there's people from all over the world that come to Wells.
And I'd never heard of this kind of cancer. I'd never heard of this kind of tumor, and I'd never heard of Wills Eye Institute. But I got on the computer and I started reading about it, reading about the tumor, reading about the cancer, reading about Wills Eye Institute, and in very small print on their website they had a statement called Pearls for Patients, and in that Pearls for Patients was the listing of hosts for hospitals and a telephone number. I called the telephone number, and Tammy answered, and she took my information. She was filling in for Mike, who was out of town for 10 days, and I don't think that happens very often. I think he's always there day in and day out. But Tammy was gracious. I was scared, Joe was scared. We didn't know what we were going to do, and to take off and have to go to Philadelphia when they told us that he has a large mass and it's more than likely it's a cancerous mass. She put me very much at ease and said, this is exactly what our program is about, helping you feel comfortable in coming into our city. And she took my telephone number, my address, and my email address, and just said, don't worry about this because we're going to help you. On Friday, before we flew to Philadelphia, Mike called us from Hosts for Hospitals, and he said, here's the name of your host, and here's a telephone number, call them. Mike also said, by the way, you have told us that you're coming in on Saturday, and that your testing and your diagnosis is going to be on Monday, the 29th of October, but and then we understand that you're leaving on the 30th. And I said, yes, that's what they told me. And he said, well, I don't think so. I've had an opportunity to work with other patients that have come in for wills for that. And he said, quite frankly, a lot of times they really work with you and go ahead and process your information and set up the surgery right then. He said, let me get some things working. I was like, oh my gosh, I didn't even, I want them to do something while we're there, but I didn't even think about that. Well, what am I going to do about airline reservations, and what would I have done if I didn't know where we were staying or what? So he took that concern away from me, and then the next phone call I got was, we've got a second home for you to go to, and don't worry about it because you're going to have a place to stay as long as you need to while you're here in Philadelphia having medical treatment. And I was just so relieved, and so was Joe. We couldn't believe it. And calling family and friends and telling them about this program, none of us had ever heard of it, but we thought it was fantastic. We just couldn't believe it. Margaret and Richard, our second host, have had us here since Tuesday morning, the day that we had to make the decision of what was going to happen to Joe's eye. And they said, you can stay here as long as you need to.
And Joe and Donna are the 15th what should I say? The
Yes.
Guests.
the 15th guest set to grace our home.
They've been a pleasure to have in our home, and we've had a lot of laughs together while they've been here, in spite of the serious situation that they're in.
The doctor told me that he proposed that I have inoculation, which is removing the eyeball. And of course, that was quite a shock. But the other alternative is to have the radiation implants put in. My thought was if I took the eye out, that I would not have to worry about the cancer anymore. But he said that it was probably a 50-50 chance of if either way I went, that it would come back eventually in another part of my body.
When they were caring, they wanted to know what was going on, but they didn't ask personal questions. And so we opened up to talk to them. And instead of giving their opinions, they said, well, what do you want to do, Joe? What are you thinking about? And it gave somebody for us to talk to that wasn't a family member that was emotionally involved, but it was somebody that cared. And I think that's what I love about Hosts for Hospitals.
And so we went back and talked about it, and we went back the next morning, and we decided to I could start losing sight in that eye within 3 months or a year, or it could be 5 years. But eventually, I will lose sight in the eye because of the amount of radiation they had to put in.
When people come here, they're always in some sort of distress, and they're in a serious situation, and they're scared, and they're, looking for comfort, and frequently they do ask us to say a blessing or a prayer or something.
One of the things that can come out of Hosts for Hospitals is sometimes people do need that touchstone about life and the opportunity to be witnessed to.
One of the things that I've said is it's cheap grace. That is to say, there's practically no effort. It's at our convenience. And furthermore, we live with tremendous privilege just by living in Philadelphia, where there are these fabulous medical resources, and that we can make that available to other people kind of takes the edge off of being so privileged that we can share the wealth of the community in this way.
We know that Joe's cancer has changed our lives, and it's going to be something we're going to live with for the rest of our lives. But we've also met people that care and have opened up their homes and treated us like people that are important to them. That's really made a difference to us.